Mr. Kirshner, I'm just curious, if you were to define what weaponization of the federal government looks like, just in a quick, short definition, what would it be?
Using the Department of Justice to reward your friends and your criminal associates by delivering pardons after they'd been convicted by juries or before their case was even concluded or before their case was even charged, and conversely using the Department of Justice to punish your perceived enemies, order investigations and prosecutions, even if they're not warranted by evidence. I'm sorry that was not brief.
That's okay. It was accurate. Because that's how I see weaponization as well, and it's something that we saw a lot out of Trump specifically, because all of his friends were going to prison, and he's probably got more friends that are headed to prison soon, and if we are lucky, he will find him a cellmate soon as well.
In today's video, we're digging into the hearing on the weaponization of the federal government. Now, let me tell you, when Representative Jasmine Crockett opened her book of facts, it was game over. Republicans couldn't handle it. Their emotions ran high because, as you'll see, the truth had them teary-eyed and fired up. And trust me, it only gets wilder from here.
What would a loyalty test mean for the military? It wouldn't be their ability to conduct the necessary programs for our national defense, but rather their loyalty to the president and the president's agenda, which may or may not have anything to do with national security. We have some history here that might be useful. For example, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would not carry out President Trump's political agenda. Certainly willing to carry out the military national security agenda, but not the military agenda. And that earned Chief of Staff General Mark Milley the opportunity for the president to call for his execution. Now, if Project 2025 is the roadmap for the Trump administration, and the Trump administration demands a loyalty test for our senior military generals, colonels, and career intelligence officers, what does that mean for the nation? Posse comitatus is often used, but I believe this committee has from time to time taken a look at the emergency powers of the president, which basically can waive nearly every law. So we may wind up, given Project 2025 and the loyalty tests that seem to be embedded in it, with a military that is capable of involvement in domestic affairs, and an intelligence community that's supposed to be looking outside of this nation, involved domestically. So the combination of the current very long list of emergency powers that the president has, together with a loyal military hierarchy and a loyal career intelligence community that is loyal to the president, not necessarily loyal to the Constitution or to the history of our democracy. What could it mean to our nation? A military that is used domestically for political purposes, an intelligence community that is looking inward. Project 2025 presents a very serious challenge. 5 seconds. I'd like all of you to ponder what this would mean. Is it a problem? Mr. Kirshner.
It is, and what I'm reminded of, Representative, is after I graduated law school and I was sent to Army Law School, the JAG school on the campus of the University of Virginia, one thing that was drilled into our heads is you must obey lawful orders, but equally important, I would say more important, You must disobey unlawful orders. Project 2025 would wipe out that second command, which is more important than the first command, and the danger can't be overstated.
That was Representative John Garamendi breaking it down for us. He's exposing the real deal about Trump's Project 2025. And man, when Mr. Kirshner laid out the cold, hard facts, it was brutal. Project 2025 isn't just another Trump plan. It's a full-on strategy to reshape the government to fit one man's agenda.
You know, Mr. Horowitz, in another way, you've done things that my constituents appreciate. You've provided oversight and accountability, and the oversight and accountability function of Congress seems to work. The public finds out about all kinds of things, but they're just so frustrated because at the end of the day, Congress just shuts up and cuts the check. We don't provide reform. We don't provide accountability. Instead, you see people like Mr. Veltri promoted, somewhat validating Mr. Allen's observations, and trusted, as it turns out, with critical investigations. I mean, we saw the FBI. I hope there's an investigation underway on the events in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. Is there an active Inspector General overview of that?
I actually don't have jurisdiction over that. My understanding is the DHS Inspector General.
Inspector General Kufari does. And as SIGI, you know, the Integrity Committee, you formally directed that. You know, they've tried to target people, even as Inspector Generals. Did you feel sometimes limited or coerced because of how SIGI has changed their behavior over the years?
Yeah, let me just say I was the chair of SIGI, not the chair of the Integrity Committee, and by law that
is separate.
Distinction. Congress has separated those two, but the Integrity Committee is part of SIGI. Look, I've dealt with issues at the Integrity Committee. I think there are improvements that certainly need and can be made, both internally and through legislative action, that would improve the process. But I do think, and I've worked with folks there, that they have tried to exercise their responsibilities, the chair of the as members of the Integrity Committee, as best they could.
Well, one thing we absolutely have to do is we have to change the way it's funded. Right now, they're harvesting cash from other agencies, including extra money. And so Congress needs to take action, in particular with funding.
Now let's talk about Representative Warren Davidson and what he had to say about the events in Butler, Pennsylvania. He tried to use this as some kind of gotcha moment, but let's be real, it came off more like a distraction. These Republicans love bringing up random events to derail the conversation from what actually matters. Davidson's mention of Butler felt like another attempt to stir outrage without offering any real solutions. We know these hearings should be about addressing weaponization and misuse of federal power, but instead, they keep throwing in stories like this to shift focus. It's like they're allergic to facts, and the second you bring those facts out, they scramble for anything else to talk about, just like he did here. And then we had Jasmine Crockett doing what she does best, laying out nothing but facts. She's known for keeping it real in the House, and this hearing was no different. Crockett wasn't just talking, she was bringing receipts. And let me tell you, the truth stung. The chairman didn't take it well at all. He got real upset, almost like he wasn't expecting her to come in with so much fire. But that's the thing with Crockett. When she speaks for the people, and she doesn't sugarcoat anything. And every time she hits them with facts, it's like clockwork.
I'll pick up maybe a little bit where my colleague just left off, and the question was about Butler, Pennsylvania. I'm curious to know if any of you are aware as to whether or not the FBI is involved at all in determining what's going on in Springfield, Ohio, because as far as I'm concerned, there is domestic terrorism afoot, and it is at the word of the Republican nominee and his running mate. So do we know if anyone is checking into that on the federal level? I'm just curious. Just a yes or no, anybody?
I don't know.
Okay, perfect. Either way, I want to move on, and I want to talk about Mr. Kirshner. I'm just curious, if you were to define what weaponization of the federal government looks like, just in a quick, short definition, what would it be?
Using the Department of Justice to reward your friends and your criminal associates by delivering pardons after they'd been convicted by juries or before their case was even concluded or before their case was even charged, and conversely, using the Department of Justice to punish your perceived enemies, order investigations and prosecutions, even if they're not warranted by evidence. I'm sorry that was not brief.
That's okay. It was accurate. Because that's how I see weaponization as well, and it's something that we saw a lot out of Trump specifically, because all of his friends were going to prison, and he's probably got more friends that are headed to prison soon, and if we are lucky, he will find him a cellmate soon as well. But nevertheless, as we talk about weaponization, because this whole committee feels as if it's projection, I want to go to something that's pretty interesting, but I'm gonna start with Mr. Allen. I wasn't on this committee the first time you were here, so this is the first time we're interacting. But I am caught up to speed, and I have a simple question for you, yes or no. Do you believe that career employees like yourself should have your job taken away even if you've done your job well and followed agency rules? Do you think it's right to be fired just because you have political disagreements with those above you?
No, it's not right to persecute anyone for their political or religious beliefs, especially in an organization where there's supposed to be the free flow of ideas.
Okay, I appreciate your answer and your honesty, and I absolutely agree with you. It is interesting, though, because that's exactly what Trump and my Republican colleagues would do if they won the election. It's spelled out in Project 2025. Trump would strip due process rights available to career civil servants and remove, suspend, or reduce their pay in an all-out effort to oust agency employees for partisan reasons rather than because of issues with merit or performance. And before you say Trump and Project 2025 aren't affiliated, I'd ask unanimous consent to submit into the record Trump's campaign page where he claims on day one, I'd reissue 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to fire rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. The only reason democracy is standing strong today is because we had public servants who pledged loyalty to the Constitution and rule of law and not to Donald Trump. Mr. Kirshner, your testimony today demonstrates you're familiar with Project 2025. Is that a fair statement?
Particularly as it pertains to the Department of Justice.
Okay. And you are aware, or maybe you're not, we'll see, on page 547 that Project 2025 states its goal of implementing a top-to-bottom overhaul of DOJ that, quote, must include the FBI, because anything less would, quote, guarantee the failure of the conservative administration's agenda.
That does not make a lot of sense to me.
Okay, but that's in Project 2025.
It is
Okay.
on, yes, it is.
All right, just wanted to clarify that. And also, this agenda includes, for example, enforcing federal criminal laws against providers and distributors of abortion medication, as well as rescinding policies that hold that sex discrimination includes discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, transgender identity, among other things. Is that correct?
Yes, Representative, on page 562, they talk about aggressively going after prosecuting, quote, providers and distributors of abortion pills that use the mail. So folks who are, mailing abortion pills to women who need it, that is really not what is endangering our country or inspiring, violent crime.
I absolutely agree. This week, the New York Times reported multiple instances of Trump trying to weaponize the DOJ to retaliate against his political enemies, finding that, quote, Mr. Trump told Mr. McGahn that he wanted to order Mr. Sessions, the Attorney General, to prosecute Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Comey, and if Mr. Sessions refused, he would take matters into his own hands. I know my time is running out, so I just have to ask, Mr. Chairman, given you've convened this hearing, theoretically it's you, given that you've convened this hearing on weaponizing federal agencies, will you commit to publicly condemning Trump for attempting to weaponize the government and condemn Project 2025 for its efforts to do the same?
Gentlelady's time has expired. And I yield, I recognize myself for 5 minutes. And Mr. Allen, I'm going to give you a little notice. You've written some notes. As far as I'm concerned, you're the person I'm most interested in hearing from. I'm from Charlotte. I've been to the Charlotte field office. I know some people there. I was extraordinarily impressed by you and the other whistleblowers when you previously appeared before the subcommittee. I'm impressed by you again. I haven't been able to be here the whole time. I'm going to yield you some time, just if you have things that you wish to say in just a moment.
But the first thing I'm going to say before I do that, and then I'm going to give Mr. Jordan the rest of my time, is I'm just overwhelmingly troubled by the fact that no one seems to be able to do much about what has happened to you. You got the Inspector General, very respectable person. You've done a lot of things that have been historic, but you know, you issue a management alert. And to me, it sounds ridiculous to say you don't think these guys at the FBI, the senior managers, understand that they shouldn't retaliate against somebody by putting them under extreme personal hardship while they engage in a completely baseless persecution over their security clearance, and they leave them in limbo for 27 months, and to this moment haven't paid what I understand to be the consideration under the settlement that's been reached. That is astonishing. And if that's not astonishing enough, that all you can do is issue an alert, Congress does absolutely nothing. In the majority party, not one thing to impose on the Department of Justice or the FBI an appropriate sanction for what they've done. And we have a hearing about it, and everybody in the minority party, they're fearing what Donald Trump would do in the next administration while they sit here and they look at the guy who's been persecuted by the FBI.
The Republicans get flustered because they know they can't handle it. It was one of those moments that makes you sit back and think, yep, this is exactly why she's got so many folks rooting for her. The way the chairman reacted showed exactly what happens when you're hit with undeniable truth. Facts make people uncomfortable when they're not on your side. Now, I gotta say, I really wish Jasmine Crockett had more time to clap back at Chairman Bishop, but unfortunately her time ran out. But don't worry, because Representative Stacey Plaskett came through just right. She stepped in and made sure nothing got left unsaid. Plaskett picked up exactly where Crockett left off, laying out the facts with precision and confidence. It was like she said, if Crockett couldn't finish this, I've got it. And she sure did. Every word hit its mark, and you could tell the Republicans were struggling to keep their cool.
You know, I understand my colleagues' concern that it would appear that Democrats are not taking the issue of whistleblowers seriously. And I think we do. We have a committee for that, the Oversight Committee, for which when I was a member of the Oversight, that's when I first met Mr. Horowitz, was in having oversight over different agencies and questioning you about some of your findings there, some of which, when I first came to Congress, were targeted against a Democratic administration, at the time, the Obama administration. We've gone through a Trump administration, we're now in a Biden administration, and so the vagaries of political persuasion, you've seen them all. But I think the reason that the Democratic members have been bringing up Project 2025 and President Trump is because it presents a global threat, a true weaponization of offices and of a position against the American people as a whole. We see places like North Korea, Hungary, Iran, now Venezuela, where those citizens could not have imagined 20, 30 years before, potentially, that they are living under a dictatorial rule. I went to school with individuals, I'm dating myself, in the early 80s with students who had fled Iran. I have been around young people in undergrad who have fled North Korea. And the notion that anything like that could happen in this country seems so antithetical to our thinking. But we cannot drop the ball in when we see an individual or a group of individuals who have power trying to take that control. And it is our opinion, many of our opinion, that Trump, for his own purposes, has now joined forces with individuals who have offered Project 2025 as a means to an end for each one of their own desires. I would ask to submit to the record a CNN article, Trump claims not to know who is behind Project 2025. CNN review found at least 140 people who work for him are involved.
Without objection.
Thank you. And in this article, and in other places, we will see the nexus of relationships between the president and individuals who have written this. 6 of his former cabinet secretaries, 4 individuals nominated by the former president as ambassadors, his first deputy chief of staff, my former colleague Mark Meadows, and also his longtime advisor, Stephen Miller, who were advising Project 2025. Federal Communications Commissioner under President Trump, Brendan Carr, Lisa Laurenti, who was a delegate to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, all wrote components of Project 2025. We have the American Accountability Foundation putting together a roster of current federal workers it suspects could impede Trump's plan for a second term. I would direct your attention to what we have up there on the screen, which shows so many associates who have, in fact, contributed to the transitional plan for a presidential Trump next term that are part of his orbit. Paul Dans, top official in Trump's White House. We have Ben Carson, former HUD secretary. Christopher Miller, acting Secretary of Defense. Peter Navarro wrote a section defending the former president's trade policies. This has been drafted as the next conservative president's last opportunity. The last opportunity for what? Not the America we know now, a different form of America. One that meets the demands of specific individuals, not all of us. One women that does not include us having complete autonomy of ourselves. One that puts a form of Christianity that may not be my form of Christianity. That's why we have a separation of church and state, so that we can all worship our God as we wish. That's not what Project 2025 is looking towards. Today you may be part of it. Tomorrow you may not be. Today it may help you. Tomorrow it may not. I know I'm on the front line. I know my community's on the front line, but tomorrow it may be yours. Next week, next month, 180 days he's given himself. 2 years from now, it may be your son, your daughter, pointing in the military, pointing a weapon at their fellow citizen, at their brother or their sister who are protesting on the streets of America. Because yes, in Project 2025, it allows the president to direct the active military to come to the streets of the United States against those that he deems as political rivals. That's in Project 2025. Those are the things that are in there against us as Americans. And that's the reason why, Mr. Chairman, we keep talking about it. Not because whistleblowers' issues are not unimportant, but because this is a clear and present threat right now to the American people that we need to join forces with and stop.
This is what makes Plaskett such a force, her ability to come in at just the right moment and make sure the truth is front and center. No fluff, no games, just straight facts, keeping the pressure on and making sure they know that the nonsense isn't gonna slide. And that's a wrap for today. As you've seen, Jasmine Crockett and Stacey Plaskett didn't come to play. They came with facts, and the truth hit hard. It's clear the Republicans weren't ready for it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on all the latest. And as always, thank you for watching, and remember to stay woke. See you in the next one.